Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next CPH review session. My name's Ashley Mueller, and I'm the Manager of Educational Programs at NBPHE. So for this session, we are discussing communications. And if you have any questions like our previous sessions, you can put those in the Q&A. And then also the chat is open and available for everyone to interact with each other throughout the session. So, as I mentioned, today's topic is communications, and our presenter today is Alexa Newman. Alexa has a Bachelor of Arts in Biology Sciences with a minor in Psychology and Public Health from the University of Delaware. She holds a Master's of Public Health and Epidemiology from the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health, where she conducted novel research in the fields of aging epidemiology. Alexa then joined the Delaware Division of Public Health as an epidemiologist, where she served in several roles focused on infectious disease, emergency medical services, and preparedness and population health. She also played a significant role in Delaware's COVID-19 response activities. Alexa is currently an environmental epidemiologist in the regulatory sciences at Corvetta AgriScience. In this role, Alexa supports the development of broad-based strategies related to environmental epidemiology and human exposure characterization. Alexa is certified in public health and also a candidate for the Certified in Climate Change Professional Program by the Association of Climate Change Officers. And finally, in Alexa's free time, she enjoys cooking, baking, knitting, and participating in various book groups. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Alexa.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley, for the introduction and for the opportunity to be here today. Really excited to get into some content on communications, from the public health perspective. So we'll dive right in and see how this webinar goes, see where the hours take us. Oh, all right. Okay. So just a couple of things on our agenda for our time here today. I'm going to start with some kind of overview and my thoughts on why I enjoy having a CPH and why I think it's important, covering just and then some of the more like logistical things. We will go through our content, some dedicated time on communications, and then we will end with practice questions. So I've prepared about 10 questions with answers that we will go through. And then, as Ashley said, the chat box is open. Please feel free to add in any questions that you have throughout the presentation or at the end, and I can try to address those during our time as well. All right, we're getting started with some background. Okay, so Ashley just gave my biography, so thank you. So yeah, I have a degree in public health. I'm trained as an epidemiologist, and I've been certified in public health for, oh my gosh, about 3 years now. The time has flown by, and I've really enjoyed being CPH. I've done previous review sessions on communications as well as another topic, and then I've had the opportunity to write and review CPH exam questions. So some experience with the NBPHE. And I'm currently working in the agri-science industry as an epidemiologist. All right, so why CPH? These are my thoughts on why it was important for me to get certified and why I'm glad that you're here today, and a little extra sort of maybe motivation for why I see it important that professionals or students pursue this certification. So the CPH really shows your commitment to public health and to further education in the field, right? It's going a step beyond your formal education or your on-the-job experience, but really showing that continued dedication to it. I do believe it also provides a competitive advantage where you can distinguish yourself from others who may not have the CPH. Though I've never had an employer that required the CPH, I do know that it has been sort of preferred or viewed favorably from that sense, from a hiring perspective, because again, it's showing that commitment. And along those lines, being CPH means that you're staying up to date on relevant topics and relevant trends in public health. So by participating in the different activities required for CPH recertification every few years. You're maybe going to webinars, going to conferences, things like that. You're continuing your learning. And so you're staying tuned into public health, maybe in areas that aren't necessarily what you're working in or what you're studying. They're great professional development opportunities. So like I said, I've had the opportunity to lead CPH review sessions and participate in the item writing and validation. So there's that sort of network of those professional development opportunities that you get when you are CPH. And then along those lines, you're part of the broader CPH community. So, in my biography, you heard that I enjoy participating in book groups. So the CPH actually has an online book club through Goodreads where you read books on different topics in public health and just participate in an online forum. So I've had the opportunity to read books that might have never come across my radar. And again, goes to that sort of staying up to date, continuing your education. And then just a little bonus, get a couple extra letters at the end of your name or title, once you have that CPH. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on the exam logistics, but just in case, there were any questions or you wanted a refresher, right? So the exam is offered year-round, it is computer-based, and you can take it at a testing center or at another location with the live online proctor. The exam is all multiple choice, so you have 4 hours to complete 200 multiple choice questions. I have here most candidates finish in under 3 hours. That's from the CPH website or the NBPHE website. And I can confirm that when I took the exam, I had plenty of time to review my questions, to go back and spend a little extra time on other questions that maybe I had struggled with or wanted to check again. So definitely very manageable within that time frame. Okay. So just want to hear from you if you're comfortable sharing, come off mute or type it in the chat. Just what are you thinking as you prepare for the exam, no matter where you are in the preparation process, kind of anything that's on your mind at this point that you'd like to share or ask about. We'll take a minute to hear their thoughts.
So I'll read it out because since we have such a large group, it's hard for us to take people off mute, but I can certainly read off everything. Someone says, I hope to remember everything I need to. Understanding the scope and breadth and depth of the exam.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about the number need to pass. That's something that I think we covered in the first session that we had about the passing score, that we don't have that out. So if you have questions about the passing score, please watch that first review session. The next one is getting to know through the data section. That's not my strongest area.
Okay.
I'd definitely like to schedule for next month, preparing the previous version, what I need to know for the new content.
Yeah, these are all some great thoughts. I'll just chime in here. Yeah, so if you go on the NBPHE website, it does have a good breakdown of the high level domains and then within those kind of like the individual items. So I found that really useful in sort of hitting these consolidated kind of topics of like, well, what is important within each area. And I can attest that the exam is not designed to trip you up or to challenge you. It's really giving you an opportunity to show your competency in public health and in this area. So I think by attending the review sessions and using the materials that are available online, that's a really great way to set yourself up for success.
So we do have the last comment I'll say, because it goes right into your presentation today, but is how can communication skills be evaluated through multiple choice?
Oh, well, communications are part of everything we do in public health, everything we do all the time. So we'll hopefully I can address that throughout our time, but we'll cover. So yes, while communication can kind of seem abstract, there are concrete like theories and concepts related to communications and ideas, best practices and things like that. So there are some more kind of rote memorization application things, concepts that apply in communication. So if you still have questions on that at the end of the time and you're unsure maybe how communications can be assessed by multiple choice, then follow up again. But you'll certainly have an opportunity to practice questions at the end, and maybe that'll give you a good idea of kind of how you could be assessed on communications.
And then we just have some people who are nervous about taking a test for the first time in a long time.
I can agree. I felt similarly. I meant to take the exam right away, but I graduated right before COVID, so it took me a couple years to take the exam. And yeah, certainly that can be cause for concern. But I felt so well prepared by again going through all the webinars, going through all the practice questions that are available online, and identifying kind of, hey, I know these areas really well. They're not a concern for me. Whereas, oh, maybe these points I kind of forgot since school or whatnot. So I think all the resources available are going to leave you really well prepared, and totally normal to have, test anxiety or some trepidation. Just, remind yourself that you've put in the time needed. There's plenty of time for you to take the exam. You are more than well prepared for success.
I think that's about it for now.
Okay. All right, great. Well, yeah, please feel free to keep commenting as we go along, and I can address anything that comes up at the end. All right, so I think there was a question or some comments on the domain areas. So the exam is covering all of these areas in between 8 and 12%. So roughly split into, approximately equal areas. So you're looking, this exam is cross-cutting. It's covering everything from data to law and ethics to communications to program management and program planning. And today, yep, we are focusing again on this communications domain. Public health is a very cross-cutting discipline. So some applications of, even in any of these domains may be very like specific to that domain. But again, you may see elements of multiple domains kind of brought in together, right? Because these things don't exist in silos per se. So we will focus today on communication and how you can think about communication from a public health perspective and best practices for doing so. All right, so just a little context for this specific domain from the NBPHE website. So communication is addressing strategies and methods for addressing different populations, closing the gaps, considering health literacy, thinking about ethical communication, health needs, evaluations, and then also facilitating team building and highlighting the role of public health and health systems. So communications is broad, has lots of applications within public health. And then these next two slides just cover straight from the website the 11 domain areas within communications. That's what I referenced earlier. If you go online, you can see for all the different domains what those domain areas are. I think that's a really great way to help you prepare is, hey, can you understand or identify, each of these areas that are presented? So thinking about how to communicate responsibly and professionally, identifying gaps and needs. We'll talk about health literacy, which is a really important concept, developing, implementing communications plans, using culturally appropriate communications, and then a little differently thinking about risk communications and ways to address those sort of public health disasters. The use of different platforms, so social, digital, and traditional media for communication, being effective in our communications, ethical principles and analysis in communications, and then finally, facilitation skills and translating data. So the content of this presentation will focus on each of these 11 areas. So we're just going to go through and go through all 11. I'll have at least one slide on each of them, and then we'll have an opportunity to practice the content here with those preset Q&A. All right, so before I go into the content, I would like to hear from the audience. What are examples of public health communications that maybe you encounter in your work, that you have studied in your education, or maybe that you've experienced as a citizen of the world? What are some examples of public health communications?
So we have here, we've got data collections, stop smoking billboards, road signs, anti-smoking campaigns, infographics, vaccine education, talking to stakeholders, emails, posters, flyers, health literacy, health education classes, public service announcements, social media posts, newsletters, policies. We have lots of great ideas.
Yes, these are wonderful. Thank you so much for your inputs here. Those are all examples of public health communications. And across all those examples, I heard different applications or sort of different settings. So some of these communications might be from the public health agency externally to the public, whether that is broadly the public for, say, vaccine messaging or more specific to certain groups, so smoking cessation campaigns. I also heard emails, so that could be an internal example of communications, right? You need to communicate with your leadership, with your colleagues, with stakeholders, and things like that. So communications really underpins everything we do in public health, no matter the audience, no matter the intention and things like that. We also communicate needs for resources. So you may be putting in a grant to request funding or request personnel to address a public health challenge or an identified need. So communications occurs in lots of different ways. And we'll go through that. So thanks everyone for your input. All right, and now we will go right into the content. So you can take a little break from participation for the time being. Okay, so in that first domain area, communicate in a responsive, responsible, and professional manner. So in thinking about communication, that includes what you're sharing, but also how you're sharing it. So the message and then how it's delivered. Really important to think about who else may see your message aside from the intended audience. Kind of a rule of thumb when thinking about communication, and this is not limited to public health at all, but it is certainly in public health, right? Think about if this message that you are sharing was to be put out to the world, kind of what would that impact be? Who could be seeing it? And also what might their responses be? So we'll talk a little more about sort of methods of communication, but we're in a very interconnected world. So information spreads very quickly in ways that we haven't necessarily had access to before. So again, being mindful of kind of where your message might go and who might see it, whether it is the intended audience or not. You'll want to stick to the facts. So when you're communicating, whether that is to your boss, to the public, to another stakeholder, focus on what you do know. Avoid speculating, kind of that sort of like rabbit hole of hypothesizing. Avoid using jargon that would be unfamiliar to your audience and may detract from the overall message. And then also avoid sarcasm and jokes. There may be an appropriate opportunity for humor, especially if you're trying to develop some sort of like public service campaign, but you certainly don't want to have an inappropriate tone that would detract from the message, because ultimately your goal is to be impactful in your communication. And along those lines, you really own your communication and the message that you're putting out. It may be something that you're developing as yourself, again, whether that's an email or a news blast or something that you've worked on with other people. But you as a part of creating that message, you own that. And again, communication doesn't always have to look external. We can also think about professional communication, so information sharing between colleagues, and how your communications may look a little different depending on your audience. And we'll spend some time talking about that in today's content as well. So for identifying communication needs and gaps, communication can be verbal. Now I'm, speaking to you. Nonverbal, I'm also, I have body language to accompany my presentation, and they can also be written, or it may be a combination of these. So again, sort of that like medium of communication could look a little bit different, and we glean messages from all the ways in which something is communicated. So if you're in a meeting with someone and they're sitting back with their arms crossed and they're very disengaged, that can be part of the overall communication, sort of the impact of what that looks like. Also consider sources of information. So when you're trying to identify what are the needs and how can we meet them, well, how are people getting their information? There are lots of different levels. So at that kind of smallest level, you have your personal network, family, friends, coworkers, those people who you interact with on a daily basis, who may sort of be that kind of immediate source of information. Maybe they share the same circles as you, so they're also accessing the same sorts of information. Um, then going out a little bit, you have that community level. So maybe these are groups that you're a part of. Perhaps it's a faith-based organization. Maybe it's the area in which you reside. But again, that kind of larger get source that may be a source of information as well. And then this is nebulous, can hardly be captured, in any level. But social media, right? That is a very, very rampant source of information. We'll talk a little bit about types of information, but social media can certainly allow us to share things very quickly, and allow people who may not be so easily connected to actually stay very connected. And then when you're trying to, again, identify those needs, well, look to what already exists, what's already been communicated, and then think about how it may be used again, how it can be improved, and then, implemented again. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can look to what has been done, and its history of success, and identify how it can be best applied in the situation that you are facing now, where you're seeking to share communication. Moving along, we'll talk about health literacy now, and this is a super important component of health communications and public health communications. The average reading level for a US adult is at the 8th grade reading level. Of course, some people may be higher than that level, at that level, or below that level, right? But if you were to average it, it equals out to about that middle school level of education, or that reading level. And so when we are trying to develop communications that can effectively reach and be understood by many, many different people, keep that in mind. And I will have a formal definition of health literacy in a couple slides, but just want to think about kind of some concepts related to health literacy and how we can ensure that our communications are, best understood by the intended audience. So consider the use of plain language, which makes it easier to use and understand health information. So that sort of goes along the lines of avoiding jargon. So just plain language, extending on that, using active voice where the subject of the sentence is the one performing the action versus receiving the action. So active voice may be the health official delivered the message, whereas a more passive wording of that, the message was delivered by the health official. So active voice just makes it very clear, very straightforward. Use familiar and common terminology. Again, that idea of avoiding jargon. You want to use words that are going to be easily recognized by the audience. And that could change based on your audience. Certainly, if you're talking to a group of your peers who have the same very high level technical expertise that you do, you can use different phrases and wording than you might if you were talking with a public, a group of people in the public, or even to another group of stakeholders who may not have the same background. So you want to use that familiar terminology. It doesn't mean it's always the same across settings, but recognizing who your audience is and being mindful of that. And then lastly, use examples, use analogies, use visual aids, which will all really help contextualize your message and make it more familiar and easier to understand, and can have that sort of impact, right? If you're putting like a little infographic next to some text about your message, that infographic might stick in your audience's mind and help them remember the message that you're trying to share, and so ultimately have more impact. And then thinking about developing and implementing communication plans, the first thing I would say is, well, who is your audience? What's their role? Are they internal or external? Are they technical or non-technical, right? Audience is sort of this loose term, but your audience may look different depending on the situation. Your audience could change from situation to situation, but you want to try to understand who you're speaking with. And then also, well, what are their needs and motivations? What are they seeking information? Are they trying to make a decision? Do they just want to better know what's going on? And so what do they know already? What may they be coming with, thinking about the sources of information and what information they may already be arriving to you with? And then what do they need to know? Because in order, you want your plan to be effective, you want to develop effective communication. So what what gap are you trying to close? What impact are you trying to have? And then when thinking about public health marketing services, in terms of communication plans, we have 4 Ps that are important to know: product, price, place, and promotion. So those are the 4 Ps of public health marketing services. And again, you'll want to think about who your audience is, what they're seeking to know in this application as well. All right, as promised, I have the definitions of health literacy as we focus on incorporating culturally appropriate approaches into communications. So these definitions here are from the CDC, and I've included 2 definitions. I think it's important to highlight the similarities and the differences between personal and organizational health literacy. So personal health literacy, the degree to which individuals have the ability to find, understand, and use information and services to inform health-related decisions and actions for themselves and others. It's really important. It's not just accessing, but it's also understanding and then being able to use that information. In previous definitions of health literacy, it's really just been about like the information existing, but recent updates have included, again, that actionable, using the information, making those actions and those decisions, whether it's for the information seeker or someone else on their behalf. So that's personal health literacy. Organizational health literacy is very similar, again, focusing on finding, understanding, and using information. But that first part's a little different. It's the degree to which organizations equitably enable individuals to be able to do that. So just because the information exists doesn't mean that it's accessible, and it doesn't mean that it's equitably accessible. So organizational health literacy kind of gets at it from that perspective of, well, what information is being put out there, and are people able to find, understand, and use it? And then we can also think of health literacy as bidirectional. It can be both a cause and a consequence of other health disparities. So maybe because of a pre-existing condition, an individual has lower health literacy, which may, further exacerbate the underlying condition. Or on the flip side, having low health literacy may mean that an individual is not able to find and use, information related to services, and that may introduce a disparity, into their life. So thinking about it from that bidirectional perspective. And then also you want to involve the appropriate stakeholders. So now we're thinking more broadly about culturally appropriate approaches into communications. Involve the appropriate stakeholders, use a trusted messenger. So you may be the one developing the message, but who is the best person to implement it? How might it be received? That goes again to thinking about who's your audience and what are they seeking to gain from your message, from that interaction. One example that always comes to mind when I'm thinking about this is during the pandemic, when vaccines were introduced, a lot of faith-based leaders were viewed as trusted, or are viewed as trusted messengers, even outside the context of the pandemic. But they were really valuable to the community in that they were able to deliver information from the public health officials about, vaccination eligibility or opportunities to be vaccinated, things like that. So it's not just developing the message, but using the appropriate stakeholders, using a trusted messenger to make sure that it is ultimately effective. And kind of along those lines, right, think about that different attributes of your intended audience, where they're coming from, what they're seeking to gain, what their previous experiences might be, and really understanding different needs and preferences. Not everyone is going to have the same first background, but then also goals, and that's okay. The most important thing really is to meet people where they're at. I think this ties in really nicely to some theories and sort of like health behavior and health promotion and social justice, which are outside the focus of today's topic, today's webinar, but there are different kind of theories that we can apply when we're seeking to incite change or to promote a health behavior. But you need to meet people where they're at in order to help them, understand your message and ultimately for it to be impactful. And then kind of a, final golden rule. I think we can apply this to any interactions we have with people as humans. Seek to understand and to be respectful. So you want to make sure that you're trying to listen. You're not just trying to push what you think is the best, but understand where that person is coming from, where your audience is coming from, and be respectful in how you're approaching that communication, because there may be different preferences, there may be different past experiences, and the better kind of aware of that you can be, ultimately, the more fruitful that engagement will be. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little and talk about risk communication models and principles to address public health issues, emergencies, crises, disasters. So I'm going to focus here, kind of back up and think in broad strokes about hazard, risk, and exposure, because this is important, right? We're focusing on communication, but ultimately, as the communicator, if you're in a situation where you need to implement crisis communication, you want to understand what's going on. So I think it's really helpful to have a solid working understanding of these definitions. So you have the hazard. That is the agent that can cause harm. It's an intrinsic property of that agent that can ultimately result in damage. Exposure, on the other hand, is the contact with the hazard. So hazards exist in and of themselves. Something may be hazardous because it can cause harm, but then there also has to be exposure with the hazard to ultimately result in risk. Risk is the likelihood of harm occurring given that you are exposed. So risk, the existence of a hazard does not imply risk. There has to be that element of the exposure component, and risk can be greater or lower depending on the nature of the hazard, the nature of the exposure, and things like that. That's outside the scope of today's today's content. But one example I like to use that I think nicely illustrates this is the sun. So the sun in and of itself can cause harm, right? If you're unprotected outside for long periods of time without appropriate mitigation measures, the sun may result in harm. That is an intrinsic property of the sun. But in order, for the sun to be able to cause that damage, you have to have exposure. So if you go outside, it's hot right now in the middle of summer, at least where I am. You go outside in the middle of the day, sun's high in the air, you're not wearing sunblock, you're not wearing, UV clothing. That's introducing exposure. And therefore, there is an element of risk. I can't quantify the risk right now, but there's a likelihood of harm. There is some likelihood of harm from the sun, given that you had that exposure. And now there are certain ways to mitigate it. But again, we'll think about it now in terms of kind of risk communication models. So as promised, we'll spend a little time talking about the types of information. I think this is actually really fascinating, especially after the past few years, with how we've seen information spread and can you continue to see it spread. So kind of going in this like a tiered manner. Misinformation is information that's false, but it's not intended to cause harm. So maybe, one messenger to the other, one person to the other, wires got crossed. The information is no longer correct, but there was no bad intention there. It's just not right. Extending on that, we have disinformation. That's false information with a specific intention to cause harm, manipulate the situation, what have you. So it's both incorrect and intended to sort of evoke that, or twist the truth. The final category here is malinformation. And so this is a little bit different. It's this information is based in a truth, but it's intentionally exaggerated so that it can be misleading or cause harm. And so that's where sort of there's this kernel of something factual in there, but now it's been so manipulated and it's kind of put out there to really incite that fear or cause harm, whatever it is. So thinking about this kind of elevation of types of different information. And, I'm sure we can think about lots of ways that all of these have come up, in our personal lives or that we've observed or whatnot. So just being aware of kind of, what information may your audience also be exposed to. And when you are in a situation where you need to communicate about risk, be transparent about what you know and what you don't know, but what you're going to seek to find out. It is okay not to know everything. I saw a really great post earlier that is like, science doesn't always get it right because science is learning, or, uh, what we know today may change tomorrow because we found something out in between. So the message we deliver today, we're gonna acknowledge what we know, we're gonna share that, and then be straightforward about what we don't know, but what we're going to find out, and then close the loop. Once you have that information, follow up. Give another press release, issue another email, have another phone call to share that information. Because in a crisis, these responses are often emotional and personal. So you're thinking about, how is this impacting me, my children, my loved ones? We're not always thinking rationally in a time of a crisis. And again, thinking about who is your audience and what are their motivations. That will be really helpful in being effective in these situations. And then it's not always possible for this, but to the extent that you can, be prepared and proactive, develop a communications plan. I mentioned earlier about looking to what's already been done. So maybe, you're having, this is a sort of a novel situation that you're responding to, but there's a similar situation that happened before that you can turn to and understand what was previously done. Or maybe when you're coming off of that situation, you develop a plan moving forward so that if something similar were to happen, you would be better prepared to more swiftly and impactfully respond. So again, we can't always be proactive. So that's the nature of emergencies. But to the extent that we can, trying to document best practices for the future, because of course it is inevitable that issues will continue to emerge in one way or the other. And then final note here on the thought on the line of risk communication, CDC has a crisis and emergency risk communication kind of a website dedicated to it, and I pulled this infographic off of it. So thinking about different stages of risk communication, so you have that pre-crisis, sort of maybe something's been detected that there's an issue and it's something that you'll need to respond to. The initial communication that you're sharing, you may not have a lot of information, but again, that initial outreach. Maintenance, depending on sort of the nature of the crisis, this may look longer or it can be shorter, but that kind of more sustained communication. And then as you move back to sort of that blue sky day, the resolution, you're now phasing out of the acute disaster, the acute emergency, but there still will be information to be shared in that resolution phase. And then lastly is kind of evaluation, which I mentioned, right? Document what you learned, identify opportunities for improvement for the next one. So again, that's the crisis and emergency risk communication from the CDC. All right, we'll move off of risk communication now and think about different platforms. So identify and utilize social, digital, and traditional media in public health communication. As I mentioned earlier, social media allows for rapid proliferation of information, for better or for worse. Maybe I should put because it's a great thing that we're able to be so connected that we can share things in ways that we've never been able to before. But again, it may not always be easy to vet where information's coming from, or sort of its origin. And thinking about digital communication, consider the formatting of your digital messaging and what may be most appropriate for your audience. And again, that's going to depend on who you're talking to, what their needs are, what they're coming to the table with, and recognizing that communication occurs in many, many different forms. And it could be one of these, or it could be multiple of these all at once. So visual, oral, written, graphical, and so much more. As I shared earlier, consider bringing in multiple of these elements for really more impact and more success. So maybe you issue a press release, but then you also give a briefing, right? So you're leveraging both written and oral communication, and then while you're speaking, you put up some figures to very concisely show your messages. So you leverage different forms of communications, and it can be kind of mixing media. And so social and digital media they really increase the public's access to information. Again, that may be favorable, maybe not as favorable, depending on the messaging that's been sharing, but it allows people to stay connected. So for example, I have a peer support group. So maybe people who have some sort of common element uniting them are able to connect and look at resources and have that support across the whole country or across the world. And that's a great thing, to be able to stay interconnected, so we can really use our connectedness to our advantage here in communications. And just a couple thoughts I'll plant, questions that I would have when thinking about communication, especially on those more like social and digital platforms. So who has access to it? Is it a restricted group of people? And this is both on the communicator side and then the recipient. So the messenger, who is able to access that, who can post and respond. So if you're with a public health agency kind of, and you have, say, a Facebook page, well, who has access to that? Who can interact with people? Are there going to be personnel monitoring this forum 24/7? Because also on the recipient end, who can access that information and who may be engaging with it, and what does that look like? Is it more dynamic where people can respond, they can post, they can comment, or is it sharing information without that pullback, that the ability to communicate back? So different considerations for different circumstances, but excuse me, all things that I would keep in mind. Excuse me. All right. So now we'll think about assessing communications for effectiveness. Of course, anytime you speak with someone, whether it's personally, trying to say, hey, I want to go here for dinner tonight, or we're thinking about public health, right? Trying to move the needle on health promoting behaviors, encouraging people to get vaccinated, encouraging people to remain compliant with medication, or to follow screening protocols. Ultimately, the goal is to be effective and to improve the public's health. So when you're delivering a message, consider, how's your audience going to use the information? Again, is it for decision making? Is it for awareness? Things like that. How can your information and your messaging influence their decision, right? What are you adding to what they may already know and what they may be wondering about? On the other side, then, what opposing information exists? What other messaging exists? And how could that influence your audience's decision, right? We can never assume that we're the only ones who are sharing information. And people may be bombarded with lots of different messages, and even as even someone who's well informed and who has strong health literacy may be conflicted by different messages, different sources of information. So again, your information doesn't exist in a vacuum. So how can you contribute to the overall outcome that you're seeking to achieve, but also what other information is going to be out there? And maybe that's supportive, or maybe it's opposite to what you're trying to share. And then again, we've thought about this in a couple different ways now, but being iterative. So, okay, you've delivered this message and it had, an impact. Consider changes that would make the message more effective or more successful in the future. And that's one great thing about communications, that they're never stagnant. We always have the opportunity to, evaluate, to refine, to improve, whether that's, very quickly, and tomorrow we're going to share this new message, or whether it's, hey, this is something to keep in our back pocket for the future, the next time we're in a similar situation. Also want to spend some time thinking about ethical principles and analysis when you're developing communication plans. Communication should be accessible to the intended audience. That kind of goes back to that health literacy concept, right? The ability to find and use information. So consider communication channels, so sort of how that information is disseminated and the language used. That can be both the sort of the types of language, so the wording, the terminology, sentence structure, things like that, but also the literal language. Your communication is accessible to your populations. Not everyone is English speaking. Some groups may speak other languages or may have other needs. So in order to even have impact, people need to be able to access and understand your information. Communication should also be accurate, right? Public health is a science, and so we do want to share the best available information that we have. It's okay if that information changes, right? As we covered before, you acknowledge it, you acknowledge the gap, you share new information when you have it, but whatever you're delivering needs to be accurate at that time that it's shared. Then, of course, we are all humans. We all bring with us personal biases, but to the extent that you can, identify those biases, take them off the table, ensure that they're not influencing your intended message. I find that people in the field of public health are very passionate about the work that they do, and that's amazing. I think it really is a true calling to be able to help ensure the public's health, improve and sustain public health. But of course, we also bring with us biases, and so trying to remove those from whatever the messaging is. And then communicating respectfully and honestly, always a good principle to follow. At the end of the day, people are humans and they want to be viewed as such and treated as such. And so when we do things like remain respectful in our communications, maintain active listening, that really goes a long way to ensuring that the communications are ethical and then also, again, ultimately effective. All right, we're kind of getting to the end of the formal content in our domain areas. So thinking about applying facilitation skills and interactions with different individuals and different groups. So that may be, say, you're doing a focus group to try to understand the public's perception on this new public health activity or something like that. So just a couple of ideas that I have prepared here for ways that you can, really be impactful as you facilitate, in your facilitations. So be present, actively listen, assess the situation, right? You're seeking to understand, not just to respond. And then following on that, be curious. Ask questions to get more information, right? Try to understand where people are coming from and what their ultimate goals are. And then as a facilitator, you are there to really help resolve or, if needed, mitigate conflict. And you'll also, you want to be flexible, pivot the conversation as needed. That goes along the lines of being present and listening and understanding, okay, maybe I thought we'd be going down this path, but I'm hearing lots of conversations about this and we're going to explore that, right? So just be flexible. And then also be empathetic in having compassion for what others are feeling. So whether this is a shared experience that you have or not, people are coming to these interactions with their own experiences. And so be empathetic to where they are and perhaps what they're experiencing. Last idea here is on translating data for dissemination across a variety of audiences. I love talking about data. It's something that we all use all the time in lots of different ways. So unfortunately, it is very easy to misinterpret or misrepresent data, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. And you can think about that again in that sort of mis, dis, and malinformation. Sometimes data are just misrepresented because perhaps someone didn't have a complete understanding of how to properly share that, or perhaps there is an intention to misrepresent whatever the data are telling you. Regardless, that can be done, very easily. So being aware of how the data are shared and what went into arriving at that sort of data generation. When you are sharing data, be aware of your audience's familiarity with the topic, especially when you're talking about statistical methods or sort of those more complex computational methods, right? We rely on numbers to help us make decisions, but not everyone is going to be intimately aware of kind of the sausage making behind the scenes. So just be aware of the familiarity with the topic. Maintain ethical standards, of course. So when you're sharing information, you're not going to be breaching anonymity or confidentiality. So say this is a public health response where you have identified one case of a very highly pathogenic infectious disease. You wouldn't want to disclose too much information about the affected case. You want to maintain those high ethical standards, but there may be some necessary data dissemination for the appropriate public health action and decision making. So being mindful of those standards and making sure they're adhered to while also sharing the appropriate and necessary information. Provide context for what it is you're sharing. Again, thinking about what your audience's familiarity with the topic is, but also wherever possible, kind of let that analysis speak for itself. And that kind of goes back to the idea of bringing your own biases out of it, right? These data are available. This analysis is here. Give the necessary context and then let that information speak for itself. I think the final slide that we have here, this I pulled from actually my MPH coursework when I took a communications class as I was preparing for this this presentation. I really like it. I think it does a good job of highlighting different examples of really the challenge of communicating science. So in the two right-hand columns, you have scientists and lay audiences. So obviously those are very broad categorizations, but they're all going to have different backgrounds and ways of thinking and perceptions in different domain areas. So for example, scientists again, these are generalizations, but for the purpose of this exercise, may have, be very strongly rooted in rational decision making. I think that's very much part of being a scientist. Lay audiences could have totally variable kind of attitudes towards that. Some people may tend towards more rational decision making. Some may be more emotional or kind of rooted in a less rational approach. So again, that's just part of being human. People have different perspectives. Another example, scientists have very high quantitative and scientific literacy especially in those domains that they are familiar with, right? So an expert immunologist in their field is going to have super high scientific literacy when they're talking about that, whereas a lay audience may not. It's not guaranteed that they're going to have that same level of awareness and familiarity with the topic. So we as the public health scientists have to make sure that we communicate in a way that's understood by the audience. We may have way more information and background and context, but it may not be necessary to share that information to be impactful. Just some things to think about. Okay, that was the end of the content. I just have a couple closing thoughts, and then we will move on to Q&A. So, as I said earlier, attending the review sessions is a really great place to start. You're putting yourself, already ahead of the game by devoting this time. And I want to reemphasize the exam is not meant to trick you, but rather for you to show your competency in different domains across public health. You're already very well prepared from your education or your work experience, depending on where you're coming from. So trust that you not only have the content that you've gained from attending these sessions or that you will gain, but also that you have that actual, training and experience. And then there are lots of different resources available. I access these all the time when I studied for the CPH and found them very helpful. So 2 quotes here, hopefully they're motivating. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. You've already started, you've attended this session at a minimum, so you're on your way to greatness and success by doing so. And then your positive action combined with your positive thinking result in success. So this is a great step to come and attend a session. Now try to combine that with a positive mindset and you will be successful. All right, so we'll move on. We can go through the formal Q&A that I have, and then if there are any remaining questions about content, I'm happy to answer those at the end of our questions here. So I will move forward with the very first question, and I believe you'll see it pop up as a poll on your screen to answer. All right, What is the average reading level for a US adult? All right. Most people overwhelmingly responded eighth grade. A couple voted for second and 12th grade. The correct answer is B. It's the eighth grade reading level. That was just pure recall from the slides that I shared earlier, but that eighth grade is the average reading level for a US adult. I think mostly everyone recalled that fact that I shared earlier. Question 2, what is the most important element of an appropriately tailored message? So we'll give you some time to read through these.
And I'll give everyone about 45 seconds to answer. So we're about halfway.
Most people, about 90%, answered A, take characteristics of the target population to account. And then a couple people also responded to each of the other answers, B, C, and D. The correct answer here is A. This is the single best answer that most appropriately or that most concretely addresses the question. So you really want to understand the attributes of whoever it is that you're trying to message to. Of course, B, C, and D are still considerations, but again, the single best answer here is to consider who it is you're talking to, because different groups will have different needs, different backgrounds, different preferences, and things like that. So taking into account those characteristics will ultimately allow you to be the most successful in your communications. Another recall question here, what are the 4 Ps of public health marketing services? Okay, a little bit of a spread here on the responses, with most people answering C, product, price, place and promotion. This one's always a tongue twister for me because there are so many Ps. So C is the correct answer. The 4 Ps of public health marketing services are product, price, place, and promotion. That is another recall from what I shared earlier. And so some of those, so you saw product was included in every single one of these. Product and promotion were both included in all the answers. However, the correct answer is that you're thinking about what the product is, kind of the price of it, whether that's numerical or kind of an effort or other costs, its place, and then promotion, so how it is promoted to the audience. So it's a recall question if you want to go back and look at that. Next question, how are health communications shared?
I just relaunched the poll. I'm sorry, everyone. I was trying to put the link for the previous sessions in the chat and I hit enter and it should be back now.
All right, 100% of people responded D, all of the above, and that is the correct answer. Something I covered, lots of different ways that we can share communication. So it could be one or more of these. Great job. Our next question, a health department is trying to reduce the risk of HIV/AIDS for African Americans ages 50 and older. So which of the following communication strategies is most important to serve this community? Couple folks answering the first two options. No one picked C, and most people responded that it's to present the information in a culturally competent manner. So great job. Most people here answered correctly. The most important communication strategy to serve this community is to present the information in a culturally competent manner. So the first sentence is identifying there's a specific group of people that the health department is trying to reach who may have specific needs and preferences and backgrounds. So certainly, yes, we do want to make sure information is evidence-based, make it available in lots of different ways. C is not the correct answer, and I believe no one answered that right because we know the average reading level is an eighth grade reading level. But that's all to say the best way to communicate would be to do so in a culturally competent manner. Great work, everyone. All right, number 6, when communicating to the public about a public health disaster or emergency, how is risk defined? Quite literally, how do we define risk? All right, a little bit of a spread here with people answering for all the different choices. The majority of folks responded answer B, risk is the likelihood of harm given exposure. That is the correct answer here. So this was a recall from the definitions that I shared earlier. Option A, contact with the hazard, that's the definition of an exposure. Option C, agent that can cause damage or harm, that's the definition of the hazard. So the risk, again, sits at that intersection, the likelihood of harm, of hazard from that agent, given that you had exposure. I understand also responding option D that it depends. So yes, risk can look different based on the situation. But this question was asking, how do we define risk when we're thinking about it? Likelihood of harm given exposure. So hopefully that helps clarify things. A health department is designing a web-based health promotion intervention. Which of the following issues is most important with regard to effective communication of this health information to the community? A spread in the responses here. Most people responded A, the health literacy of the target population. Answer here. So certainly options B, C, and D would be important in thinking about kind of the visuals, how the health promotion materials are organized, their color, and things like that. But when you're thinking about effective communications, trying the health literacy of the target population, are they able to find, access, find, understand, and use that information? So that's going to be most important when you're thinking about effective communication of health information, health literacy of your target population. Recall question here: which communication technique makes it easier to use and understand health information? Okay, a little bit of a spread in the responses here. Most folks responded option C, plain language, which is the correct answer. Plain language makes it easier to use and understand health information. So that was from the slides that I shared earlier, wanting to present information just in kind of a simple manner that's easy to understand, that could be accessible by many different populations. So that was the question. That was the best answer to this question here. Of course, it is important to use common terminology. You want to be ethical in your communications, but those don't best address this question. All right, great job, everyone. We just have a couple more questions left. So which of the following practices is recommended when you're communicating public health risks and disasters? All right, responses to all of the answer choices here. Most people, about 75%, answered B, being available to the media during a crisis. B is the best answer here. So we'll go through each of these. Stating no comment when the level of risk is unknown wouldn't be a recommended best practice. If instead of not addressing the question or the topic, share that information that it's not available at that time, but that you can follow up and share when it is known. Option B, C, yeah, you do want to maintain that professional separation from media sources. You wouldn't want to appear as looking biased or sort of like you're, colluding with anyone. So these are all important considerations. Limiting the background information presented to the media kind of depends on the situation and what the information you're talking about is. Of course, like I said earlier, you want to maintain ethical standards and make sure not to, breach anyone's privacy. But also you want to share the appropriate background information. So that's not the best answer here. Best answer is B, being available to the media during a crisis. So you want to be seen as that sort of transparent figure that is accessible. You're sharing what you know, you're acknowledging what you don't know, and you're closing the loop. Best answer here for communication during public health risks and disasters. So really good job. We have our final question here. A smoking cessation campaign highlights better health outcomes and a healthier environment. Which of the following social marketing principles is used in this campaign?
I'm gonna give this one about 10 more seconds.
All right, big spread here in the answers, almost an even split kind of across them or across some of them. So let's go ahead. The correct answer here is prioritizing consumer rather than marketer benefit. So this is a little bit of an application here where really, so that sort of highlighting better health outcomes and a healthier environment where you're marketing to the consumer about the benefit that they're going to be receiving as a result of the smoking cessation and engaging in the information or in the messaging that's being shared. So that's what I see as the best answer here. Um, it's not uh, it's not really addressing these other A, C, or sorry, A, B, or D. You really see that the benefit to the consumer is being addressed in the smoking cessation campaign, which is why it's the best answer here. So thank you for your participation in these questions. That ends my questions that I prepared, but I will happily take any questions or comments that we have time for today.
Okay. So we do have two questions here at the moment in the chat or in the Q&A. So the first one is, with regards to mis/disinformation, who assesses the intention to determine which way to classify it?
Well, that's a great question. So I think that's going to be kind of specific to the information, I think. So as I mentioned, right, we have lots of different ways that we get information, and it's often hard to vet the source, but we have trusted sort of scientific sources of information that we rely on, that we can lean into to understand kind of what is that sort of most true knowledge that we have about it. So it may be situationally dependent, but looking to those trusted resources to kind of get at the root of, okay, so, what information is being shared, and but also it may not always be clear what the intention is. Again, it's situational. You may have more information in some situations than you do in others. So I think it'll really vary based on the nature of that.
Great. The next question, in the sense of common terminology, do you mean the common terms among scientists or those used by laymen?
That's a good question. So it'll depend on your audience, right? If your audience is scientists who would have like common terminology is always referring to what is common among a group of people to whom you are speaking. So it could be scientists, and so it could be like, oh, we talk about hypothesis and t-tests and things like that. But it could be to the public. So it'll depend on who your audience is and what kind of phrases and terms are common among them in a way that they would understand your message.
Great. Another question, why is it more important for information to be culturally competent rather than based in truth?
So there's not they don't need to be competing per se. It's just you want your information to be based in truth, but delivered in a way that is respectful of different cultures, different backgrounds, and different preferences. So it's making sure to deliver truthful information in a way that is culturally competent.
Yeah. Then we have a question just to help with the test. Are there keywords in health communication questions that we should pay attention to help guide us towards the correct answer or eliminate some of the answers? So do you have any suggestions how to answer some questions? Like, for
Oh,
example, opinion is a keyword to avoid in answers looking at evidence-based questions.
that's a really good example for
Mhm.
whoever shared that. Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have like a list of things that you would be looking for, but where I did kind of provide like more definitions or more kind of concrete explanations, I would go back and look at those here and know those concepts and look for those kind of words to help orient you. I hope that's helpful.
All right, here. Another question. Are there standardized indicators for tracking effectiveness of risk communication messages disseminated?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, we could have a whole series on risk communications. I find it very fascinating. I'm not personally, I don't have personal experience with those, but there definitely are models that we can use to assess effectiveness. And also, when we're thinking about different ways of outreach, there are lots of analytics that you can do on like digital platforms. So, I think again, it really depends on like the nature of that risk communication, how you're sharing it, and what messaging you need to be sharing. But certainly, there are ways that we can evaluate it. It'll just depend.
Okay. So I think, oh, sorry, there's one more question. And the question about state health departments asked to choose between A, evidence-based, or C, culturally competent. Why is it C?
Let me go back to that question. Oh, did I pass it?
Let me see. Not that one.
Oh, this one.
Mhm.
Yeah, why is it culturally competent and not evidence based? Oh, I see. And maybe that's where that question came from.
Mhm.
So it's again, it's not, they're not competing priorities. The reason D is the best answer is because your information can be evidence based, it can be truthful and accurate and based on all the best available information. But if it's not presented in a way that's going to be understood um, and accessible to your audience, it ultimately won't have that end impact that you're looking for. That's why D is the best answer here. It's not that A is wrong, it's that D is better.
Yeah, and some of the questions, I think you have to kind of think about that. Like, what is the best answer in this
Yeah.
circumstance? It's not saying like this is not correct, but yeah, this is the best answer of the four
Yes.
presented.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that is it for our questions today. I want to say a special thank you to Alexa for taking the time to present on communications. It was a great presentation and good to go through that information. So our next session is on yeah, social justice and health equity. So that is next Tuesday. And as I promised in the chat, I will send everyone the link to all the previous sessions. We have one link that goes to the YouTube channel. So you can review this session and any of the previous sessions. And I look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.